Is ghosting ever justified, especially in marriage? That question alone carries weight. It carries confusion, pain, anger, fear, and sometimes even relief. Because ghosting is not just silence. It is absence without explanation. It is a door closing without a goodbye. And when it happens in marriage, it feels like reality itself has cracked. Marriage is supposed to be the place where silence is safe, not terrifying. It is meant to be the relationship where absence is temporary, not permanent. Where conflict leads to conversation, not disappearance. So when one partner vanishes emotionally or physically without clarity, it cuts deeper than almost any other betrayal. And yet, here we are. In a world where ghosting has become normalized in dating, friendships, and even families, we now have to ask an uncomfortable question. Is there ever a moment when disappearing from a marriage is not cruelty, but survival? This is not a simple question. And it does not deserve a simple answer. Because before we judge ghosting, we must understand what it actually is. Ghosting is not taking space. It is not asking for time. It is not saying, "I need distance to think." Ghosting is the refusal to communicate while still holding power over someone's emotional reality. It leaves the other person suspended in uncertainty, searching for meaning, replaying conversations, blaming themselves, and waiting for a response that may never come. In marriage, ghosting does not just abandon a person. It abandons shared history, shared promises, shared responsibilities. It leaves behind unanswered questions that echo for years. And yet, sometimes, silence is not about punishment. Sometimes, silence is about escape. There are marriages where communication has already died long before ghosting begins. Where every attempt to speak is met with manipulation, gaslighting, rage, or indifference. Where words are twisted, feelings are mocked, and vulnerability is used as a weapon. In those marriages, communication is no longer a bridge. It becomes a trap. And when someone disappears from that environment, the outside world may call it cowardice. But the person who left may call it oxygen. We must be careful not to confuse explanation with justification. Not all ghosting is equal. There is ghosting born from immaturity, avoidance, or selfishness. And there is ghosting born from fear, trauma, and self-preservation. In healthy marriages, conflict is hard but navigable. There is listening, accountability, repair. Even when love fades, there is respect. Even when separation is necessary, there is honesty. But in unhealthy marriages, especially emotionally or physically abusive ones, honesty can be dangerous. There are partners who punish truth, who escalate when confronted, who retaliate when boundaries are set, who refuse counseling, refuse accountability, refuse change. In those situations, announcing your exit can feel like lighting a match in a room filled with gas. So is ghosting ever justified? If justification means moral purity, then perhaps no. Because silence always leaves harm in its wake. But if justification means necessity, then sometimes, tragically, yes. There are moments when disappearing is the only way to survive. A person trapped in abuse does not owe their abuser closure. A person whose safety is at risk does not owe explanations that could endanger them. A person who has been systematically silenced does not need permission to finally choose silence on their own terms. Still, this truth must be held carefully. Because for every story of survival, there is also a story of abandonment. There are spouses who wake up one day to find their partner gone. No note, no message, no warning, just absence. And that absence becomes a wound that never fully closes. They question their worth. They question their memories. They question whether the marriage was ever real. Ghosting in marriage can leave someone grieving a living person. It traps them between hope and despair, unable to move forward because there is no ending to process. This is why ghosting should never be romanticized. It is not empowerment by default. It is not strength just because it ends pain for one person. Pain does not cancel pain. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in the uncomfortable middle. The place where we must acknowledge that ghosting in marriage is almost always a failure of communication, but not always a failure of character. Sometimes it is the final symptom of a relationship that has already collapsed. Sometimes it is the scream of someone who tried every other way to be heard. And sometimes, it is simply avoidance dressed up as self-care. The difference matters. Because if ghosting is chosen to avoid discomfort, accountability, or difficult conversations, then it becomes an act of emotional violence. It steals agency from the other person. It denies them the dignity of truth. Marriage demands courage, even when love is gone. Even when staying is no longer possible. Courage is saying, "This is over," instead of disappearing. But courage also looks like knowing when speaking will cost you your safety, your sanity, or your life. We must stop asking whether ghosting is justified in the abstract, and start asking better questions. Was communication possible? Was safety present? Was accountability invited or punished? Were boundaries respected or violated? Did silence come before or after every other door was slammed shut? These questions do not excuse harm. They contextualize it. And context is everything. If you are someone who has been ghosted by a spouse, your pain is valid. Your confusion is valid. Your anger is valid. You were not wrong to expect communication from someone who vowed partnership. Their silence does not define your worth. It defines their capacity or incapacity to face truth. And if you are someone who ghosted a spouse, you owe yourself honesty. Ask yourself why silence felt safer than truth. Ask yourself whether you disappeared to protect yourself or to protect your comfort. Ask yourself whether there was a way to leave with integrity, even if it was painful. Growth begins with that reckoning. Marriage is not just about love. It is about responsibility. Not ownership, not control, but responsibility for the impact of our actions on another human being. Even when leaving is necessary, how we leave matters. Because endings shape people, they echo in future relationships. They become the lens through which trust is rebuilt or broken. Ghosting is easy in the moment, but its consequences are long. For the one left behind, it creates unanswered questions that can last a lifetime. For the one who leaves, it can delay healing by avoiding accountability. And yet, for some, it is the only way out of a nightmare. So is ghosting ever justified in marriage? Perhaps the most honest answer is this. It is understandable in situations of abuse, coercion, or danger. It is avoidable in situations of discomfort, conflict, or emotional difficulty. And it is harmful in almost every scenario, even when it is necessary. Two things can be true at once. Someone can be right to leave and wrong in how they left. Someone can cause harm while trying to survive. Someone can deserve peace without causing destruction. The goal is not to judge. The goal is to learn. To learn how to create relationships where ghosting is never necessary. Where communication is safe. Where conflict does not threaten survival. Where leaving, if it must happen, can happen with clarity instead of chaos. Marriage should never be a place where disappearance feels like freedom. And if it is, then something went deeply wrong long before the silence began. Let this conversation not be about defending ghosting, or condemning it blindly. Let it be about accountability, safety, and emotional maturity. Let it be about building relationships where words are not weapons, and silence is not a refuge. And if you are standing at the edge of silence right now, unsure whether to speak or disappear, know this. Your life matters. Your safety matters. Your integrity matters. Choose the path that protects your humanity, not just your comfort. Because the truest form of healing does not come from vanishing. It comes from choosing truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath you. And sometimes, choosing truth means leaving. But it never means pretending the other person did not exist. Marriage deserves more than that. So do you.